Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley, a 24-year-old student, went missing after a night out with friends at a nightclub on April 11th. Born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, Karen was the youngest child and only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up, Karen was known for her kind and caring nature, always willing to lend a helping hand. This trait greatly influenced her career choices. After graduating from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, Karen pursued a degree in nursing at the University of Limerick. Her interest in occupational therapy eventually led her to Glasgow, where she enrolled in a master's program at Caledonian University. Karen arrived in Glasgow in January 2015 and moved into an apartment with 3 other female students who were also new to the area. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates went to a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their apartment. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At about 1 a.m., Karen told her friend she was going to the restroom and would return soon. She took her purse and left her jacket on the table where the group was sitting. Her friends continued to enjoy themselves while Karen was away. After a while, they realized Karen had been gone longer than expected and should have returned by then. However, Karen was nowhere to be found. One of her friends searched the club for her but couldn't locate her. Trying to contact her by phone was also unsuccessful. She came with thought maybe Karen had gone home, but it was strange that Karen didn't tell anyone and left her jacket behind. The only explanation they could think of was that Karen might have met someone at the club and left with that person. With this thought in mind, they went to bed. However, when they woke up around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she had not returned home. They called and messaged Karen on social media, but she didn't respond. Although they had only known Karen for a few months, they knew that this behavior was out of character for her. Instead of coming up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves, they decided to report her disappearance to the police and inform the Buckley family about what had happened. The Scottish police acted swiftly to find Karen, and her disappearance was publicized in the media. Her parents urged anyone with information to come forward. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed footage from the club's cameras and found evidence of Karen interacting with a mystery man. Within 36 hours, on April 13th, the man was identified as 21-year-old Alexander Pacto and was brought in for questioning. He confirmed that he had met Karen at the club and they had gone to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, about 3 kilometers away. Alexander also revealed that they had been intimate. Around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment and head home, despite his invitation to stay until morning. Alexander mentioned that during their intimate encounter, Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed corner, resulting in an injury and leaving blood marks on the sheets. The police reacted ambivalently to this information. While Alexander seemed genuinely open, he also appeared to be anticipating and justifying potential evidence that might be discovered in his apartment. On April 13th, a man reported finding a woman's purse to the police. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that the purse was discovered in the park near Alexander's residence, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and identification documents. This new evidence lent credibility to Alexander's account of events, suggesting that something might have happened to Karen after she left his apartment. The search for Karen persisted, with hundreds of police officers thoroughly searching parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings for any potential clues that could aid in the investigation. At that point, Alexander Pacto was the primary suspect, being the last person to have seen Karen. However, investigators kept his identity confidential and did not disclose any information about him. 2 days after Karen went missing, police entering Alexander's apartment with a search warrant, police were immediately struck by the strong smell of bleach. They also observed that the mattress on the bed was the wrong size. Small, dark red spots were discovered on the bed and in the bathroom, and samples were taken for analysis. Additionally, a toolbox and a large quantity of cleaning supplies were found in the apartment. A police dog trained to detect human remains indicated a potential find near Alexander Pacto's car. While awaiting a search warrant, detectives discovered that Alexander had taken his car to be cleaned the previous day, but the job appeared to have been done poorly. Upon searching the vehicle, investigators found small, dark red spots on the inside of the passenger door and sent samples to the lab for analysis. As the investigation progressed, suspicions mounted that Karen might not be alive, but the search for her continued unabated. After journalists uncovered the suspect's identity, a photo of Alexander Pacto appeared on the front page of a local newspaper the following day. This unexpected move by the press ultimately proved helpful to the investigation. A man recognized Alexander's photo in the newspaper and contacted the police, offering valuable information. He claimed to have worked with Alexander in the past and revealed that Alexander rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow. This farm was approximately 9 kilometers from Alexander's apartment. The police pursued every lead and investigated this new information. The farm owner verified that Alexander indeed rented a storage space from him for £10 a week. Upon inspection of the storage space, the police discovered a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly corrosive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic materials. They also found a bonfire with remnants of a mattress that Pacto had attempted to burn. On the same day, April 15th, the suspect in Karen Buckley's case was arrested. Faced with substantial evidence, Alexander admitted to taking Karen's life, but claimed it was in self-defense. Police reconstructed a timeline of events based on evidence and Alexander's testimony. On the night of April 11th to 12th, Karen left the club around 1 a.m. The reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument, stating Karen said she was going to the bathroom and would return. It is also unclear why Karen left her jacket behind, even if she had decided to go home. Officers investigating the case reviewed 1,900 hours of surveillance footage. One recording showed Karen encountering Alexander after leaving a club. They walked together towards his car, where it's believed he offered to drive her home. However, once inside the car, Alexander attacked Karen. He struck her 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death. Investigators found dark red stains in the car, bathroom, and on Alexander's bed, later confirmed as Karen's dried blood. After disposing of her body, Alexander planned his next moves, starting with getting rid of Karen's purse, which was later recovered and given to the police. Around 2 a.m., he returned home and did something that shocked the detectives. He took the Karen out of the car and carried it into his apartment. Later, at 8 a.m., he used his phone to search online for information about caustic soda. He then visited a shopping center where he purchased 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator mask, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. To get rid of Karen's body, Alexander realized 6 liters of caustic soda wouldn't be enough. He bought more from another store on his way home and put the body in the bathtub. However, since his neighbor would return home around 8 p.m. and he wouldn't have enough time, he wrapped the body in a blanket and hid it in his bedroom. The next day, April 13th, Alexander threw a wrench into the River Clyde, later found by divers. He then visited a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles away, where he sought a consultant's advice on a product that could remove bloodstains from a mattress. He also purchased 2 padlocks that day. He took Karen's belongings to a farm and burned them. Then, he bought a barrel and took it to a rented warehouse. There, he poured in caustic soda and locked the gate with 2 new padlocks. Later that day, at 6 p.m., police visited his home and took him in for questioning. Alexander confessed to his crime, but his motive was unclear. He claimed he killed Karen in self-defense during a car argument, but investigators did not believe him. They thought he was trying to justify his actions. Police suspected that Alexander killed Karen to cover up another crime and then got rid of her body. However, the body was too decomposed to determine if Karen had suffered violence before dying. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Through his lawyer, he apologized to Karen's family and expressed remorse. Alexander told his lawyer that he was too drunk on the night of the incident to remember why he killed Karen. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have been eligible for parole in 25 years instead of 23. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her co-workers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for her shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9. Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabriel Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family, and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father. As she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school, attended by the older children, had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube, even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son, Gabriel, and 1-year-old daughter, Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a coworker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell, away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rosanna Galliano. Rosanna Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s. She was the youngest child, with 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. Her parents were Raldo and Graciela. While details of her childhood and teenage years are scarce, it's known that she finished high school in the late 1990s. During this time, her father, Raldo, worked as a mechanic. In early 2001, Jose Arce visited Raldo's workshop, where he met Rosanna. Born on November 22, 1948, Jose had spent over 30 years living abroad, including time in Greece and the United States, where he was imprisoned for 4 years for drug trafficking. He returned to Argentina in 1996, owning 8 properties in a posh area of Buenos Aires. Jose and Rosanna started dating quickly after meeting at her father's shop, where he brought his vintage car for repairs. Despite their significant age difference, Jose appeared financially stable, thanks to his mother Elsa, who still lived in the United States. When 52-year-old Jose proposed to 22-year-old Rosanna, her mother Graciela expressed concerns about their age difference. Jose argued that age was not an obstacle to love, and Graciela turned to Rosanna for reassurance. Rosanna confirmed her desire to marry him in a whisper. The couple got married on November 17, 2001, just 7 months after meeting. Jose attributed his cheerful, modern, and smart personality to winning Rosanna over. They soon had a son named Gono, but problems began to emerge soon after. Jose was a controlling and jealous partner who frequently belittled Rosanna and her family. The emotional abuse escalated into physical violence, leaving Rosanna feeling trapped and terrified. Jose's intimidating presence, reinforced by his possession of 2 guns, allowed him to maintain control, a situation that Rosanna's family was painfully aware of. He would often flaunt his guns when they had visitors, or when he visited others. On one occasion, Rosanna's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house, telling her to shut up before hitting her. Another time, Rosanna's father noticed bruises on her back, and she revealed that Jose had dragged her across the pavement. Despite these challenges, Rosanna and Jose had their second child, and Rosanna tried to make the relationship work, hoping to provide a stable home for their children. However, her efforts were consistently thwarted by Jose's temper and disrespectful behavior. Moreover, Jose's mother Elsa exerted control over their household from a distance, making decisions about their lives during her brief visits to Argentina. By 2006, Rosanna had reached her breaking point after enduring years of unbearable abuse, and she finally found the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. Her family, however, remained largely oblivious to the full extent of her suffering. Months later, Rosanna filed a second complaint, which included a request for a medical examination to document her injuries. It was then that she confided in her sister Monica, and the two made a pact to stay in close contact, reaching out to each other whenever something happened. Monica became Rosanna's safe haven and primary source of support, providing a refuge from the unbearable realities of life with Jose. Rosanna would often visit Monica's apartment with her children, though Jose would dictate when they had to return, frequently backing up his demands with death threats. Rosanna made the difficult decision to move in with Monica and the children, leaving Jose to stay in his own home. After a period of time, Rosanna took further action by filing another complaint and seeking a divorce, which resulted in a restraining order being issued against Jose. From then on, the only times they met were during child visitation sessions at a neutral location in El Remanso Exal de la Cruz, as arranged by the court. Rosanna confided in her neighbor, Daniel Gonzalez, a married father of one who worked as a gardener. Rumors began to circulate about a possible romantic relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, although this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats persisted, and Rosanna shared a chilling voicemail with her brother Oscar, in which Jose casually spoke about killing her in mid-2007 while socializing with friends at a bar. Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, a 32-year-old man from Marino who worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly became close, exchanging phone numbers and starting a romantic relationship. Oscar was an old-fashioned gentleman who treated Rosanna with kindness, attention, and listened to her, which was a welcome change after all the turmoil she had faced. By December 2007, Oscar had become a part of Rosanna's holiday celebrations, even dressing up as Santa Claus to delight her two sons. However, their happiness was threatened by Jose, who was keeping a close eye on Rosanna's every move and was aware of her new relationship. The looming divorce had panicked him. Jose tried to persuade Rosanna to end things with Oscar by offering her a truck, but she refused. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital, not Jose. Running out of options, Jose, with the help of his mother Elsa, concocted a plan to hire a hitman, whose identity remains unknown. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Rano to pick up her sons, aged 4 and 3. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming that Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. But Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself and asked for the children to be returned. The call was brief, and Rosanna then went back inside. Around 10 p.m., Rosanna sent Oscar Lugo a casual text about their plans for the next day. Later, at 10:50 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again, unleashing a deadly trap. Rosanna stepped out into the garden to improve the reception, but a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees and shot her 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, hearing the shots, screamed as Rosanna staggered and fell. Panicked, Monica tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, oblivious to the events, attempted to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m., but got no response. He then tried to reach Monica, but she didn't answer. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered from an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence, but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was left stunned after being questioned and subsequently requested a lawyer to take over the proceedings before departing the following day. Meanwhile, a red sweater was discovered during further searches, which Rosanna's relatives identified as belonging to Jose, solidifying his position as the prime suspect in their minds. The case garnered widespread media attention, sending shockwaves throughout the country and sparking a scandal as Jose and his mother publicly proclaimed his innocence, while also making disparaging remarks about Rosanna and suggesting that her multiple lovers should be investigated instead. After the incident, Daniel the gardener became reclusive, shunning all human contact. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo observed Jose lurking in the distance, watching from his truck without offering condolences or joining the mourners. Jose's defense strategy later focused on discrediting Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole witness by raising questions about her behavior, such as why her clothes bore no blood stains and why she had prioritized calling for help over assisting her sister. However, this theory lacked credibility, and the investigators countered that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to wield. The detectives also highlighted a crucial point. Anyone familiar with the house would know that Rosanna had to venture outside to get a cell signal, suggesting a high degree of premeditation in the crime. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and grandmother Elsa, while their grandmother Graciela was granted limited access. In contrast, Monica and Oscar were denied access, with Jose citing safety concerns for his sons, despite the legal restrictions. The children longed to see their Aunt Monica, prompting Jose to occasionally allow supervised visits. Monica seized these opportunities to take the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela successfully obtained visitation rights, although she was denied guardianship. In a contemporaneous interview, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had criminal records. According to Jose, Rosanna engaged in intimate relationships with these men to uncover their secrets, which she then leveraged to blackmail them for personal gain. Meanwhile, following threats, Oscar was placed under police protection as a protected witness in his sister's case, requiring him to wear a tracking bracelet. As 2007 drew to a close, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to bring charges against any of the suspects. However, a significant breakthrough came a year after the murder, when Jose was arrested in January 2008, charged with aggravated homicide due to their romantic relationship, premeditation, and the alleged involvement of multiple perpetrators. 4 years after the attack, Oscar exercised his visitation rights to take his nephews to play soccer, sharing a heartwarming hug with the 6- and 7-year-old boys. In April 2013, the trial commenced. Jose maintained his innocence during the May proceedings, but the trial was delayed when he suffered a stroke, ultimately pushing the final verdict to November 2013. The judges concluded that the murder was meticulously planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. Jose and Elsa were found to have chosen the time and place for the attack, aware that a phone call would lure Rosanna outside, rendering her vulnerable. The court determined that financial motives drove the murder, as Jose sought to avoid splitting the marital assets. Jose and Elsa received life imprisonment sentences. The higher court upheld the conviction, citing Jose's threats, the domestic violence endured by Rosanna, and the dominant influence of his mother. The actual perpetrators of the shooting were never identified. In 2015, Jose and Elsa were placed under house arrest, with Jose's health and Elsa's age cited as reasons, allowing the children to reunite with them. The media continued to follow the children's story for years, during which Monica and Graciela had no contact with them. The boys were shuffled between homes familiar to their father, but unknown to Rosanna's family. In January 2017, the court granted the children a weekend visit with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Galliano family prepared their home with fresh paint, a thorough cleaning, and decorations, and Graciela cooked their favorite dish. That weekend, the Galliano home was filled with joy as the boys played soccer, video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after another stroke. The event was another devastating blow for the children, who attended their father's funeral. During the funeral, they expressed their concerns about their future to their Aunt Monica, who reassured them with calmness and love, promising to support whatever they decided. They chose to live with Monica, who then had to confront Elsa to communicate the boys' decision. Through these and many other instances, it was clear that Monica always prioritized her nephew's wishes, whether they wanted to talk or preferred silence. Monica's primary goal was to provide stability and comfort for the boys. In March 2019, Jono decided against switching schools, opting to stay close to his friends and see out his final 2 years. He returned to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica pursued custody of Nahuan. Things appeared to be settling, but tragedy struck in late November 2019 when 87-year-old Elsa was hospitalized and shortly after passed away on November 30th. The following month, Monica was awarded custody of Nahuan. By the end of the year, Jono had moved in with a family friend of his grandmother's. Both brothers still required psychological support to cope with their traumatic experiences, with Jono grappling with depression. Their psychologist acknowledged the staggering sequence of events they had endured. In March 2020, Jono's housemate passed away, prompting him to take refuge with his Aunt Monica until October of that year. When he turned 18, Geronimo rented a small apartment and began living independently, supported by the income generated from his inherited properties. Meanwhile, Monica initiated legal proceedings to secure their inheritance, fearing they might be stripped of their assets. Nahuan, on the other hand, demonstrated emotional stability thanks to the support he received, and was encouraged to continue attending therapy as needed. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours, but unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, Her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media, calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed two cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and two suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrian Alexandria, and grew up with her 2 brothers, David and Andrew. Those who knew Suzanne describe her as an intelligent, thoughtful, and caring friend. In 1998, while in high school, she met her future husband, Barry Morphew. After 6 years of dating, they got married. Barry was an exceptional baseball player and was signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Meanwhile, Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. However, Barry's sports career was cut short due to a serious injury, and he switched to a career in horticulture. Suzanne had been teaching for 4 years when Barry started his landscape company, which gradually gained momentum. The couple had 2 children, Mallory and Macy. They lived a picture-perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Despite beating cancer twice, in 2018, the Morphew family decided to move to Mayville, Colorado, for a fresh start and to be closer to their daughter Mallory, who attended Western State University. They settled into a stunning 7-acre property where Barry could hunt and continue his work as a contractor. He also became a volunteer firefighter. Suzanne retired from teaching and dedicated more time to her church and her new hobby, sports mountain biking. The Morphew family seemed perfect from the outside, but they had their secrets. It wasn't until May 10, 2020, that their problems came to light. That Mother's Day started off like any other at the Morphew residence. Barry and their daughters left the house, leaving Suzanne alone. Barry claimed he had a landscaping appointment in Broomfield, 3 hours away from Mayville by car. Meanwhile, the girls went on a camping trip. Barry and the girls planned to return home that evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, when they didn't hear back from her, they started to worry. The girls sent her a message to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but got no response. This was unusual, since Suzanne was very active on social media. They expected her to be on her phone, especially since she was supposed to attend her best friend's daughter's wedding and share some photos. After several hours of no response, Mallory and Macy grew concerned and asked their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter went to the Morphew house between 4 and 4:30 p.m. and found it empty. Barry's wife called him to explain the situation, and he advised her to check if Suzanne's mountain bike was still at the Morphew residence. If it wasn't there, he told her to contact the police, which is exactly what she did. The police arrived at the Morphew residence, and Barry, along with his 2 daughters, returned home, eager to learn about Suzanne's whereabouts and condition. A few hours into the search, the police discovered their first significant lead. 2 deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike near a steep ravine, not far from the Murphys' home. This suggested that Suzanne might have been involved in a crash. However, there were no signs of a struggle on the bike or in the surrounding vegetation, and no skid marks indicating that she had used her brakes. Despite the mountain bike being found at the bottom of a ravine with no damage, and no signs of struggle or disturbance to the surrounding vegetation, detectives suspected foul play. When presented with this evidence, Barry's reaction was unusual, and his subsequent explanation, that a mountain lion must have moved the bike, seemed far-fetched. Many people found Barry's behavior during the investigation into his wife's disappearance to be suspicious. In a private conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper, Barry elaborated on his mountain lion theory. Notably, he was absent from the search parties organized by Suzanne's brother, Andrew, who was skeptical of Barry's account of the bike ride and suggested that Suzanne might have gone missing on May 9th instead of Mother's Day. As the investigation continued, suspicion shifted to Barry when Suzanne's helmet was discovered 1 mile from their home, precisely in the direction his truck's telemetry showed he had driven that morning. This discovery was particularly incriminating because it was in the opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site, which was his alleged destination that day. During the initial police interview, the suspect claimed he woke up to his alarm clock at 4:30 a.m. and drove directly to the Broomfield construction site. However, the telematic data from his Ford F-350 revealed that he drove 1 mile west before heading to the site. When confronted with this discrepancy, the suspect provided an explanation. He stated that he had gone scouting for elk that morning around 4:30 a.m. and was curious to see which direction they were headed so he could track them down later. He allegedly had a habit of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. But when the officers questioned how he could have spotted elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up, he changed his story. He claimed he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and woke up on his own. When questioned about the day of the disappearance, he stated it was one of the best days the couple had had in a while. He said he worked with a coworker in Salita that morning, returned early, went for a hike with Susan, and then they grilled steak and were intimate together. Barry claimed that he and his wife Suzanne went to bed together, suggesting it might have been the last time they saw each other. However, as we've established, Barry is not a trustworthy witness. When the police investigated, they discovered that Barry had lied about almost everything that occurred that night. The first indication that something was amiss came when investigators reviewed Barry's phone and vehicle data on May 9, 2020. Although Barry and Suzanne did spend the afternoon and evening together, the events didn't match Barry's story. The first significant discrepancy arose between 2:42 and 2:44. Phone records showed Barry making erratic movements around the property. When questioned, Barry claimed he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at 2:47 p.m. Then, Barry turned his phone to airplane mode, which remained active until 10:17 p.m. Furthermore, the steak dinner he claimed to have shared with his wife was called into question when investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two. Later that night, more peculiarities emerged on the Morphew property. During their examination of the data, the police found several concerning details that raised suspicions about Barry's activities later that night. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after he claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife, his car was seen reversing backward from the driveway, moving 96 feet. Investigators thought this might be when he loaded her body onto his truck, if he was guilty. The records also showed that between 3:25 and 3:48, the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it suggested that Barry was not telling the police everything, prompting a closer investigation into the events of May 10th. Further investigation revealed that Barry had no legitimate reason to be in Broomfield that day. His company's contract was not set to start until a week later, so there was no project for him to inspect. Barry claimed that he had only visited the Holiday Inn, the job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his account. Barry was caught on camera throwing away 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When questioned about it, he gave a suspicious explanation, claiming he was trying to avoid waste disposal fees by cleaning his car himself. However, when officers inspected his car, his story fell apart. A co-worker reported a strong smell of bleach and chlorine in Barry's hotel room a day after Suzanne disappeared. Additionally, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes multiple times that day. Despite these suspicious actions, the investigators initially found no clear motive for Barry's behavior. But when they dug deeper into their personal lives, they discovered a motive. Barry and Suzanne's daughter revealed that the couple's marriage was not as happy as Barry made it out to be. Text messages on Suzanne's recovered phone and personal belongings proved this, In fact, Suzanne was extremely unhappy in the marriage and talked about how Barry refused to consider divorce. Suzanne kept a list of grievances on her phone, detailing a pattern of physical abuse. She was afraid to be alone in a room with Barry and worried about his drinking. She also suspected him of infidelity and tried to protect her phone from him, fearing he would seize it. On May 20th, when the police searched the Morphew house, they found a pen that Suzanne had bought to catch her husband in the act. Ironically, it recorded her own infidelity, not his. The pen revealed that Suzanne was having an affair with a man named Jeff, a high school acquaintance. The affair allegedly started in 2018 and had lasted for about 1.5 years. Although Jeff seemed like an obvious suspect, the police were able to clear him of any involvement in Suzanne's disappearance. The investigators believed that Barry had discovered Suzanne's infidelity, and that a note she wrote 2 days before she vanished supported this theory. The note indicated that Barry had accused Suzanne of having a boyfriend. The spy pen was crucial evidence, but it was not the only important discovery made during the search of the Morphew house. The police also found a tranquilizer dart cap in the family's dryer, a spent bullet casing in the bedroom, a large crack in the doorframe, and remnants of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. When combined with telematic data, these findings suggested that Barry might have planned and carried out the murder of his wife, possibly killing her in the afternoon of May 9th, 2020. After texting her boyfriend 53 times and sending a selfie at around 2:10 p.m., Suzanne never used her phone again. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the public learned Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance, when the police conducted a 2-day excavation of a construction site in Salida, one of Barry's job sites. In response, Barry released a strange video proclaiming his innocence. However, he wasn't arrested until May 5, 2021, nearly a year after the investigation began. Although the evidence against Barry was largely circumstantial, the prosecution seemed confident in their case due to his changing stories, repeated lies, and clear motive. Barry was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder of his wife, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. Moreover, he was later charged with filing a fraudulent election ballot in Suzanne's name, claiming he didn't know it was wrong and that it would help Trump's campaign. Barry pleaded guilty to this charge and paid a $600 fine. In August 2021, a preliminary hearing was held to determine whether Barry Morse's case would proceed to trial. During this 4-day hearing, the prosecution presented their evidence and proposed a theory of what might have occurred. According to the prosecution, Barry murdered his wife on May 9, 2020, then dismembered her body in a hotel room. He allegedly disposed of the tools used and buried her body in an unmarked grave. However, the defense strongly challenged the prosecution's account, highlighting several inconsistencies. They pointed out that cadaver dogs were unable to detect any human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room where the alleged dismemberment took place. The defense also suggested that the dart bullet cover might have been planted as evidence. Furthermore, they noted visual discrepancies in the photos of the dryer, with one image showing the cap inside the dryer and another image showing it was not present. The defense argued that Barry couldn't have used his dart gun in the alleged murder because it was broken at the time. However, their strongest evidence was the discovery of partial DNA on Suzanne's car and bike helmet that didn't match Barry. This DNA actually matched evidence from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona, raising reasonable doubt about Barry's guilt. The discovery was significant, but it was only brought up during the hearing because the CBI investigator who collected the evidence went on military leave before following up on the lead. To make matters worse, the defense was never informed about the foreign DNA matches and only learned about them during the hearing. This meant the prosecution had withheld important evidence that could have helped the defense. Throughout the hearing, the defense argued that the presence of another suspect with a criminal record meant the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to convict Barry of killing his wife. They asked the judge to make a quick decision, but surprisingly, he delayed it, citing the large amount of time and resources invested in the case. On September 7th, the judge ruled that the case against Barry would proceed, setting his bail at $500,000. Barry was released from county jail on September 20th, 2021, just 9 days before the trial was scheduled to start. However, in a surprising turn of events, the prosecution suddenly filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Barry without prejudice, allowing them to potentially reopen the case if new evidence emerges. Given the lack of concrete evidence proving Barry's guilt and the prosecution's misconduct, securing a conviction would have been a difficult task. Moreover, the prosecution had missed several crucial deadlines, resulting in sanctions that prevented 14 key witnesses from testifying at the trial. The news of the dismissal shocked the public, and Barry was pictured leaving the courthouse with a wide smile, accompanied by his 2 daughters. On September 22, 2023, investigators unearthed multiple shallow graves in Moffett, Colorado. During an investigation, Suzanne's remains were identified using her dental records and chemotherapy port. Surprisingly, over 50 miles away from the initial search area, focused on the mountains surrounding Barry's property. The discovery of her body raises questions about Barry's potential involvement in the murder. Although the police are certain Barry's truck was not in Moffett on May 9th and 10th, some suggest he could have had an accomplice in disposing of Suzanne's body, allowing him to travel to Moffett, bury the body, and return. If investigators obtained a subpoena for Barry's phone and car data for an extended period, they might be able to link him to the location where Suzanne's remains were found. For now, Barry appears to be cleared of suspicion, but the police and district attorney's office continue to investigate the case. The 12th Judicial District's district attorney told CNN that the case remains open and no further comment can be made until more information becomes available, while offering condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's lawyer has spoken out strongly since the body was found, suggesting that Suzanne might have been a victim of a serial killer because her remains were discovered in a graveyard with many other bodies. She thinks the police wrongly accused Barry and hopes they will eventually admit their mistake. Meanwhile, Barry has filed a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff's departments, and investigators, claiming they wrongly accused him of being involved in his wife's disappearance and death. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958, in Delwood, Missouri. As the second child of the Newman family, she married Mark Hupp and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family moved to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, including a job as a life administrator at State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to disability claims related to leg and back pain. Despite some past legal issues, including 2 charges of forgery, Pam's acquaintances would never have suspected her of being capable of murder. However, on August 16, 2016, Pam shot and killed Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with physical and mental disabilities since a 2005 car accident. Pam claimed that Louis had attacked her with a knife after jumping out of a passing vehicle, and that she had defended herself by slapping the knife away and then shooting him 5 times with her Ruger LCR, which she retrieved from her nightstand. However, this account of events seems suspicious, and it is uncertain what really happened that day. Pam accused Louis of instructing her to drive him to the bank to withdraw money belonging to Russ Farrier, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. According to Pam, Louis became agitated and excited, saying, "We're going to the bank. We're getting Russ's money." However, evidence later revealed that Louis's true intention was to have Louis Gumpenberger attack and kill Pam. A handwritten note found at the crime scene contained instructions for Gumpenberger. First, he was to obtain Russ's money from Pam's apartment. Next, he was to kill Pam and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The note included gruesome details, such as ensuring the knife was left sticking out of Pam's neck. The perpetrator was willing to pay Gumpenberger a large sum of money for carrying out this heinous act. Pam Hupp was arrested for the murder of Lou Gumpenberger. However, a question arose. Was Gumpenberger a hired assassin, or did Pam manipulate him, using a mentally disabled man as a scapegoat? The truth began to unravel when Pam went to the O'Fallon Police Department voluntarily. During her interview, Pam asked if it would be recorded, mentioning that she normally appeared with Chris Hayes, a KTVI news reporter. She even blamed Hayes for attracting criminals through his reporting. Pam had a history of pretending to be Kathy, a producer of an NBC TV show. According to the O'Fallon police chief and the St. Charles County prosecutor, Pam used this persona to lure Gumpenberger into her home, where she tricked him into recreating a 911 call, providing a cover for the brutal crime she was about to commit. After killing Gumpenberger, Pam Hupp planted evidence to incriminate herself, including writing a note found on his body. The police had a strong case against her due to the overwhelming evidence they uncovered. They found $9 bills on Gumpenberger's body, which Pam had placed there. The 10th $9 bill was later discovered in her dresser, and its serial number matched 3 of the $100 bills, also found on Gumpenberger. Pam Hupp was arrested on August 23, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she requested to use the restroom on the day of her arrest, she attempted to commit suicide by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she did not succeed. On January 30, 2017, Pam appeared in court for the first time. The prosecutor, Phil Groyne, argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. A grand jury convicted her of all charges. In December 2016, her bail was set at $2 million. Pam's trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to pursue the death penalty. The prosecutor's reasoning was that Pam had seemingly chosen her victim, Gumpenberger, at random. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, which allowed her to plead guilty while maintaining her innocence. This move nullified the death penalty charge and led to a jury trial being cancelled. As a result, Pam was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. Following her sentencing, she called her then-husband Matt Hupp and explained that she had confessed to killing Louis Gumpenberger to avoid putting their family through a lengthy and distressing trial. During the trial, disturbing facts about Pam's past came to light, shocking the police, judges, and the public. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Farrier could be presented in court. This ruling led to the reopening of the Betsy Farrier case. Betsy, born Elizabeth Farrier, worked with Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator and lived in Troy, Missouri, with her husband Russ Farrier and 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Betsy was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. In October 2011, she discovered that the cancer had spread to her liver and she only had a few months left to live. Sadly, she passed away on December 22, 2011. Before her death, Betsy changed the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to Pam Huff, without informing her husband or daughters. Pam claimed that Betsy had instructed her to set up a trust fund for her daughters, but later alleged that Betsy wanted her to keep the money because they had a romantic relationship. Betsy's daughters took Pam to court in 2014, trying to reclaim their mother's life insurance fund. However, their case was dismissed in 2016. In the same year, Russ, Betsy's husband, sued State Farm. On December 27, 2011, just 5 days after making Pam the beneficiary of her life insurance policy, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Sitman Cancer Center. Weakened from the treatment, she went to her mother's house, where it was agreed that Russ would pick her up, or she would stay overnight. However, Pam unexpectedly showed up and insisted on driving Betsy home, claiming to have dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter reported that her mother didn't answer her call at around 7:21 p.m. Later, at 9:40 p.m., Russ, Betsy's husband, desperately called 911 to report that his wife had taken her own life. However, Russ had been at his friend Michael Corbin's house watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterward, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before returning home. When the emergency responders arrived about 10 minutes after Russ's call, they quickly realized that Betsy's death was not a suicide. Her body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a deep cut on her wrist. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints around the entrance of the house. The investigation determined that Betsy died between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Suspicion immediately fell on Russ Farrier, who became the prime suspect. The authorities believed he had a motive, as his wife had refused to give him access to $150,000. Russ was arrested and charged with his wife's murder, while the real killer remained at large. Russ Farrier was arrested the day after Betsy's death. He became the prime suspect due to his 911 call, in which he claimed her death was a suicide. However, a glance at the body immediately ruled out this possibility. Additionally, a pair of blood-stained slippers were discovered in his closet, incriminating evidence against him. Russ was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in court in January 2012, just a day after his wife's funeral. The investigation revealed more damning evidence against Russ. He performed poorly on a polygraph test, leading police to regard his behavior as suspicious and erratic. Furthermore, at Pam's request, the police searched Betsy's laptop and found a disturbing Word document in which she expressed her fear of losing her life at the hands of her husband. Russ was held on a $250,000 bail, which he couldn't afford, so he was kept in county jail until his trial on November 18, 2013. During police questioning, Pam revealed that Russ had a history of violence, heavy drinking, and had previously threatened Betsy, making it easy to suspect him of the murder. The prosecution argued that Russ had a strong motive to kill his wife. She had received a large sum of $150,000 for her friend, bypassing him in the process. According to Judge Christina Menem, this motive was enough to implicate Russ. At the trial, Russ's lawyer, Joel Schwartz, defended his client's innocence. Schwartz claimed that Russ had spent most of the night with friends who corroborated his alibi. Additionally, Russ had purchased food at a store that evening, which made it physically impossible for him to stab his wife 55 times within the given time frame. Furthermore, there were no bloodstains on his clothes or body. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends might have been involved in the crime and had lied about his whereabouts that night. The prosecutor suggested that Russ's friends had accompanied him to buy food at ABY and stage an alibi. The presiding judge, Christina Menem, refused to allow Joel Schwartz to present crucial evidence that implicated Pam as an alternative suspect. This evidence included phone records showing Pam was still near Betsy's apartment 30 minutes after she claimed to have left, as well as the fact that Betsy had made parry of a $150,000 life insurance policy just 5 days before her death. Despite Pam having a clear motive, the judge chose to ignore it. In a closed hearing, Pam claimed to have put $100,000 of the insurance money into a trust fund for Betsy's daughters. However, in a later civil deposition, she admitted to keeping the money for herself, stating that she didn't want her daughters, mother, or sisters to have it. Meanwhile, Detective Mike Merkel of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office reported that a crime scene camera had malfunctioned, resulting in important photographs being unable to be developed. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Russ was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action in November 2013. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 30 years. Before Faria's second trial, Attorney Schwartz finally obtained the photos that showed no blood trail. To this day, I've tried to identify who in the prosecutor's office sent me those photos, but I've been unsuccessful. Fox 2 News was present in the courtroom when Schwartz dramatically revealed that he had uncovered evidence that police and prosecutors had been hiding. After this, Russ was transferred to the Jefferson City Correctional Center, a welcome development for Pam's sister Betsy. During the trial, Russ's wife testified that he had once pressed a pillow against her face, whispering, "This is what it feels like to die," because she had removed him from her insurance policy. Schwartz pointed out that this story originally came from Pam, but the judge ignored this. Throughout the trial, Russ's friends were falsely accused of being accessories to murder, thanks to the prosecutor's closing speech. Fortunately, no charges were brought against them, even though Russ spent nearly 4 years in prison. In February 2015, attorney Joel Schwartz appealed Russ's conviction. However, back in 2013, Judge Christina Menem had already rejected Schwartz's request to review the case. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch revisited the case, uncovering some suspicious facts about Betsy's death and her true killer. Their investigation found that Pam Hupp had given contradictory statements to the police, including a false claim that she had left the Faria residence immediately after dropping Betsy off. The Faria murder case was marred by controversy and deceit. A police officer recalled being shocked that nobody suspected Pam, with everyone focusing on Russ instead. A 911 operator testified that Russ seemed genuinely shocked and agitated during their call. However, 2 jurors revealed that crucial information had been withheld from them, raising questions about why the sheriff's department would deliberately hide evidence that favored Russ. The media uncovered a disturbing web of relationships between the prosecuting attorney, ASI, and key figures in the case, including the captain of investigations and a lead investigator. This information led to Russ's retrial in February 2015. The Missouri Court of Appeal transferred the case back to the 45th Circuit Court, where a new judge, Stephen R., took over. He granted a new bench trial due to new evidence and released Russ on bond pending the trial. During the retrial, Russ was allowed to present incriminating evidence against Pam. Some police officers admitted that Pam had told them she saw Russ with another man in a car while she was dropping off Betsy. The CSI agent who handled the crime scene believed that Russ's blood-stained slippers were a setup, and that the blood stain was not from stepping in blood. Russ was acquitted of all charges and released on November 7, 2015. He later filed a lawsuit against ASI and 3 deputy sheriffs for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating evidence. In 2020, he was awarded a $2 million settlement. The case also led to repercussions for the officials involved. ASI faced a bar complaint, although it was rejected. She later announced that she was willing to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Lincoln County Commissioner to review her conduct. Judge Christina Menem was suspended for misconduct in a different case and was voted out of office in 2018 for her role in the Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed a new attorney, Mike Wood, who reopened the Betsy Faria murder case. He confessed that the wrongful conviction of Russ had inspired him to take the job. Pam was eventually interrogated as a suspect in the murder and was charged with first-degree murder. The new prosecutor, Wood, sought the death penalty due to the heinousness of the crime. Betsy Faria was brutally murdered, stabbed 55 times, and her wrist was almost completely severed. Detective Mike Wood condemned the act as animalistic and charged Pam Hupp with the crime. Wood had strong evidence against Pam, including a $150,000 life insurance policy that named her as the beneficiary just days before Betsy's death. Pam had promised to put the money in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter, but instead kept it for herself, claiming that Betsy had wanted her to have it. In an interview, Pam claimed that she and Betsy were lovers, but Wood believed she was lying. Pam had also loaned her son $120,000 from her company in 2021, contradicting her earlier claims. Wood was convinced that Pam murdered Betsy by stabbing her with a kitchen knife while she slept on the sofa. He believed Pam tried to make it look like a domestic violence incident by walking around the room with socks on. The evidence against Pam included a text message she sent to Betsy's phone at 7:20 p.m. claiming she was home, but her call records showed she was still at the Faria residence. The fact that Betsy was found lying on her side suggested to Wood that she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty of the crime, but her trial was delayed multiple times due to her attorney's death and other issues. Finally, in 2023, the trial was scheduled to start in 2025. Wood was not only determined to bring Pam to justice, but also criticized the Lincoln County prosecutors for mismanaging the case and showing bias against Russ Faria, Betsy's husband. He pointed out a 2015 destruction order that could have led to the destruction of evidence, which would have made it impossible for Russ to be released from prison. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman, a former Marine, met his wife Sherry, an Air Force member, while serving in the military. Sherry instantly fell in love with Chris and knew he was the one. They got married before their first child, Garrett, was born, as they were devout Christians. After Garrett's birth, they had their second son, Gavin. Gavin was more energetic and mischievous, unlike his laid-back father and brother. Chris and Sherry were devoted parents who cherished their children. Sherry protected them fiercely, while Chris enjoyed every moment with them. When Chris left the military, the family moved to Waterloo, Illinois, where Chris worked as the head of security for TV evangelist Joyce Meyer. Joyce's luxurious lifestyle sparked controversy, with critics accusing her of exploiting her followers' fears. Chris's job was to protect Joyce from threatening letters and hate mail. He worked as her bodyguard and earned a substantial salary, providing financial security for his family. However, his frequent travels with Joyce put a strain on his family, as he was away from home for long periods. His sons deeply missed him, and his wife Sherry felt overwhelmed, underappreciated, and burdened with household responsibilities. In October 2008, Chris went to Florida, where his wife grew up, and met with an old friend, Tara Lintz, who gave him a tour of the city. Days later, Chris received a disturbing email from an address called Destroy Chris, warning him that he and his family would be in danger if he continued to work for Joyce Meyer. The ministry received more threatening emails, specifying a time and date for the potential attack on Chris's family. The emails seemed to have inside information on Chris's schedule, including his upcoming trip abroad. Chris told Sherry about the threatening emails he had been receiving, and on the following Monday, he reported them to the local police. As Chris often worked away from home with Joyce Meyer Ministries, the police offered to increase patrols around their house during his absences. But this did little to alleviate Sherry's fear for her family's safety. Sherry's concern was so great that she once asked a friend to stay with her while Chris was away, as she didn't feel comfortable being alone in the house. She emphasized that she would do whatever it took to keep her family safe. 2 months into the threats, the Colemans received a disturbing, hand-delivered letter demanding that Chris publicly renounce his faith or face severe consequences. The letter's ominous tone left Sherry genuinely fearful for her family's safety. The threat had a profound impact on Sherry, and her fear grew daily. To respond to the threat, Chris and Sherry took extra precautions to protect their family, including installing surveillance cameras around their home, which captured footage of the surrounding area and sent it to a screen in their basement office. Chris hoped the cameras would help identify the person behind the threats. After the cameras were installed, the threats suddenly stopped, and life returned to normal for the family. For a few months, everything seemed fine. However, in April 2009, the family received another disturbing letter warning that Sherry's worst fears were about to come true. Chris was deeply disturbed by the letter's ominous tone. After reviewing the security footage, Chris was shocked to see a mysterious silhouette. Although the figure's identity remained unknown, its presence reignited Chris's concerns for his family's safety. The renewed sense of fear led to increased police efforts to protect the Coleman family. Detective Sergeant Justin Barlow from the Columbia Police Department took a particular interest in the case and offered to help the family. He set up video cameras to monitor the Coleman's driveway, but unfortunately, they did not catch the person behind the threats. On May 5, 2009, Chris went to the gym and then called his home phone to check on Sherry and the boys, making sure they were up and getting ready for school. Chris called for help, but no one responded. Concerned, he phoned his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow, at 6:45 a.m. Chris told Barlow that he had left for the gym in St. Louis County around 5:30 a.m. and had been trying to reach his wife Sherry, but she wasn't answering her phone. Worried, Chris asked Barlow to check on Sherry and their sons. Barlow grabbed his gear, including his weapon, handcuffs, flashlight, and radio, and headed to the Coleman house. As he waited for backup to arrive, his priority was to make contact with Sherry and ensure everyone's safety. With a mix of hope and unease, Barlow approached the door and knocked firmly, hoping someone would respond. When Detective Justin Barlow arrived at the Coleman home, the eerie silence and darkness made him feel uneasy. The lack of movement and lights inside the house heightened his sense of unease. Minutes later, a patrol vehicle arrived with another officer to assist him. The second officer went to the back of the house to try to see or communicate with Sherry or the boys through a window or door. Instead, he found signs of forced entry into the basement, which immediately grabbed Detective Barlow's attention. He became deeply concerned for Sherry Garrett and Gavin's safety. Detective Barlow and the second officer decided to enter the house through the basement, announcing their presence as they went. But they received no response. During their thorough search of the basement, they found a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This discovery led them to believe that the camera's digital video recorder was missing. Detective Justin Barlow and the second officer searched the Coleman home from the basement up, noticing a strong smell of aerosol spray paint that grew stronger as they climbed the stairs. On the main level, they found the walls painted with derogatory messages targeting Chris, Sherry, and their sons. 13 minutes after Chris called the detective, Chris returned home from the gym and was told to wait outside while the officers searched the house. He complied, sitting quietly on the porch without asking questions or trying to enter. Meanwhile, a third officer arrived, and the three of them searched the rest of the house for Sherry and the boys. On the upper floors, they found more hate-filled spray-painted messages. When they reached the second story, Detective Barlow entered the bedroom of Garrett, the oldest son, where he appeared to be asleep. However, upon closer inspection, the detective realized that Garrett was dead, with no signs of life and a cold body. Ligature marks around his neck indicated that he had been murdered. Detectives' minds were shocked when they found Garrett's lifeless body. Next door, the second officer entered to check on Gavin and was horrified to discover the boy was also dead, strangled with ligature marks around his neck, just like his brother. The gruesome scene was made even more disturbing by an obscene message spray-painted on the bedsheets. In the master bedroom, the third officer found Sherry's lifeless body on the bed, her hair covering her face. It was clear she had been murdered. As the officer examined the room, he noticed Sherry's body had several bruises, indicating she had fought back and tried to defend herself and her sons. After discovering the bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, detectives, including Justin Barlow, heard Chris enter the house, having waited outside for news about his family. Detective Barlow took Chris outside to give him some privacy to process the news. However, as the reality of the situation sank in, Chris's reaction was intense. He felt sick, collapsed, and curled up into a fetal position, unable to contain his emotions. The shock of the brutal murders was too much for him to comprehend. Chris was in disbelief that his family had been taken away in such a violent manner. In desperation, he tried to reach out to his father, Ronald, telling him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. Ronald immediately realized that Chris was in shock upon receiving the news. Ronald was stunned by the tragedy that had befallen his family. The shocking news of the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin spread quickly throughout the community of Waterloo, Illinois, where the Coleman family lived. As the neighbors learned of the tragedy, they were left devastated and terrified. Chris expressed remorse for leaving his family alone to go to the gym, but when asked if he had any idea who might have committed the crime, he claimed to have no clue. Nevertheless, Detective Barlow noticed several suspicious behaviors during the interview. One red flag was Chris's lack of curiosity about the details of his family's murder, which seemed unusual given the gravity of the situation. The detective noticed Chris trying to hide scratches on his arms during the interview, even using a blanket to conceal them despite the warm temperature. The scratches were suspicious because they suggested Chris had been in a physical struggle, similar to Sherry's fight with her killer. When asked about the scratches, Chris claimed they came from installing a satellite dish the day before. He denied having an affair during the police interview, but did admit to a close friendship with Tara, a cocktail waitress and high school friend of his wife's who lived in Florida. Chris said his conversations with Tara were innocent, but wouldn't have been approved by his wife. He insisted he would never consider leaving his family for Tara. However, when detectives contacted Tara, her story contradicted Chris's. She revealed that they had been having an affair since November 2008. Tara provided evidence from her phone and laptop, including emails, explicit pictures, and videos that exposed the true nature of their relationship. When detectives confronted Chris with the information Tara had provided, he admitted to seeing her more frequently than he initially told them. Further investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had a secret arrangement to meet at locations where Chris worked for Joyce Meyer. They would sneak away together, often to exotic destinations like Hawaii, to spend time together without their family's knowledge. Although Chris claimed that his relationship with Tara was not an affair, detectives found evidence on Tara's phone and computer that suggested otherwise. Tara had marked a wedding to Chris on her calendar, as well as planned vacations with him, indicating that she believed Chris intended to leave his family for her. The detectives were suspicious of Chris because the evidence contradicted his claim that his relationship with Tara was casual. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked to learn about the affair, but he firmly believed that it was unrelated to the murders of Chris's wife and son. According to Ronald, Chris was a gentle person who was not capable of such brutal crimes. Ronald described Chris as a quiet individual who showed no signs of violence. However, the detectives thought that Chris's affair with Tara was a strong motive for the murders. Despite this, their initial investigation did not find enough evidence to charge Chris with the crime. After being questioned for 6 hours, Chris was released without being charged. Tara became a person of interest in the investigation, but she was eventually cleared as a suspect when it was discovered that she was in Florida on the morning of May 5, 2009, when the murders occurred. The Coleman family murders led to one of the largest murder investigations in Illinois history. A special team of 25 detectives was formed to catch the person who killed the Coleman family. They worked extremely long hours, often 20 hours a day, for 15 days straight, calling in experts to help with the case. One of their main goals was to find out who sent the hateful emails to Chris Coleman. They carefully looked at every threatening email sent to Joyce Meyer Ministries over the past year, which led them to investigate leads all over the country. The team tracked down and talked to every person who sent threatening emails, but none of them seemed to be responsible for the murder. A team of computer experts was then brought in to help investigate the crime. The detectives hoped they could find some digital evidence related to the murder. The computer experts started by looking at the email account Diaris. They found that the email address was created on November 14, 2008, just a few days before the first threatening email was sent. One surprising thing they discovered was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family came from Chris's own computer IP address. The detectives thoroughly examined the spray-painted messages at the crime scene and compared them to Christopher Coleman's handwriting to gather evidence. They took photos of the messages and collected handwriting samples from Coleman, which were then sent to a specialist for analysis. The expert's comparison of the two samples revealed a match, indicating that Christopher Coleman had written the messages on his home's walls on the day of the murders. Further analysis identified the specific brand and color of spray paint used, Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. After learning that Chris Coleman had bought something from a hardware store just days before his family's murder, a detective contacted the store's manager. The manager confirmed the purchase and revealed that Chris had bought Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint, the same type found at the crime scene. This discovery was crucial because it established a link between Chris and the murder. The timeline of the murder was also important. Chris initially claimed to have left his house around 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, but the medical examiner determined that the murders occurred around 3 a.m., which meant Chris was at home when his family was killed. 2 weeks after the bodies were found, Chris Coleman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution argued that Chris's motivations were greed, selfishness, and narcissism, and that he wanted a fresh start, but his family was standing in the way. In April 2011, Chris Coleman stood trial for the murders of his wife, Sherry, and their 2 sons, Garrett and Gavin. The prosecution argued that Chris killed his family to be with another woman, Tara, as he would lose his well-paying job with Joyce Meyer Ministries if he divorced Sherry, since the organization does not condone divorce. Chris's defense attorney claimed that an intruder entered the Coleman's home on May 5, 2009, and committed the murders. However, 2 years later, on the anniversary of the murders, Chris was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole, despite being eligible for a death sentence. The judge's decision was influenced by the recent repeal of the death penalty in Illinois, which would take effect a few months later. Sherry's loved ones wanted to keep her, Garrett, and Gavin's memory alive and decided to raise funds for victims of domestic violence, a cause close to their hearts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lori Vallow. Lori Vallow was born on June 26, 1973, in Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family with 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked hard to provide for their children. Lori was especially close to her brother Alex, who always looked out for her and protected her, even during her school years. As she grew older, Lori became a beautiful and charismatic young woman with many admirers. She was a blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile. She enjoyed being the center of attention and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Yanes. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life. As a result, their marriage ended in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William Leah. A year later, they had a son named Colby. However, their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. Lori retained custody of her son. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan, who adopted her son from a previous marriage the following year. They also had a daughter, Tylee. However, this marriage ended in 2005. Shortly after, Joseph visited their children and got into an altercation with Lori's brother, Alex. Alex claimed he was defending Lori's honor, as Joseph had insulted her. As a result, Lori was fined and received a short prison sentence. After her divorce, Lori met Charles Anthony Vallow and married him in February 2006. Charles was 17 years older than Lori, but this significant age difference didn't pose a problem for they. Charles had two teenage sons, Zachary and Nicholas, from previous relationships. The family initially lived in Nevada, where Lori's children from previous marriages resided, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Lori did not work, but Charles never criticized her for it. In 2014, they officially adopted Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as JJ, who had autism. The family was able to provide JJ with the expensive therapy he needed. By the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands. By this time, Colby and Charles's older children were living on their own, so the Vallow family moved to the island with just the four of them, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. They settled in a popular tourist area and decided to open a beach bar, specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their efforts and Charles's experience in trade, the business struggled to compete and ultimately failed. Around this time, Lori developed an interest in spiritual literature and became particularly drawn to a series of books called Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She was deeply captivated by his views and ideas, becoming almost obsessed with his writings, and began reading his books daily. In 2016, Lori Vallow and her family were forced to leave Hawaii and relocate to the mainland, eventually settling in Arizona. While her husband Charles worked hard to provide for the family, Lori became increasingly obsessed with her faith, drifting away from reality. 2 years later, in October 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie attended a seminar called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ in a nearby town, led by Chad Daybell. Lori was a huge fan of Daybell and was thrilled to meet him in person. She sat in the front row, captivated by his words, and caught his attention. After the event, Daybell engaged with his followers, and Lori stayed behind to talk to him. She was drawn to him and asked if she could touch his hand. Daybell, looking into her eyes, told her that they had been husband and wife in 7 past lives. Chad and Lori started communicating regularly a few weeks after exchanging contact information. When Lori's husband traveled to Nevada for work, Lori invited Chad to host a gathering at her home, which drew around a dozen people. They discussed God and the Judgment Day. Lori and Chad began working together to prepare people for what they believed would be a catastrophic judgment. They started producing podcasts, leading sermons, and writing articles on the topic. As Lori became more engrossed in her newfound faith, she began to detach from reality and her family. Charles didn't immediately realize the full extent of the change, believing it to be a passing phase that would soon go away. However, by the time Charles realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Lori's beliefs became increasingly extreme, and she started talking about battling dark spirits and zombies. She claimed that God had chosen her for a special mission to destroy these evil entities. Charles's efforts to bring his wife back to reality were unsuccessful, and she started to view him as a malevolent entity that needed to be eliminated. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles was on the verge of collapse. In February 2019, while Charles was away on a week-long business trip, Lori changed the locks on their shared home. When Charles returned, he found himself locked out of his own house. His personal car and family truck were missing, and a significant amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles tried to enter the house, calling out for his wife, but Lori, in a frantic state, rushed outside, shouting threats and curses. She claimed that her husband's soul had long been dead, and his body was possessed by a demon, repeatedly saying, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Charles immediately went to the police station to report Lori for stealing from him, blocking access to his home and children, and threatening him with physical harm. As a result, a protective order was issued, which prohibited Lori from approaching him. During the police interview, Charles expressed concerns about Lori's extreme religious behavior, her claims that the world was ending soon, and her tendency to label people as either good or evil. Although the officers seemed skeptical and even made fun of Charles, they still issued the protective order. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. According to his lawyer, Charles was worried about the well-being of his son JJ, who needed special care. He trusted that his mother and sister would manage the insurance payout responsibly and take care of JJ if anything happened to him. Months later, in an attempt to reconcile with his wife Lori and salvage their marriage, Charles made a critical error. He dropped the restraining order that had been protecting him. As a result, Charles began visiting Lori at her home, driven by a desire to reconnect with his children and revive his relationship. Tragically, on July 11, 2019, Charles's bid at reconciliation ended in disaster. When he arrived at the house, he was shot twice in the chest and killed. Lori's brother, Alex, admitted to the shooting and called 911. He claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Charles had attacked him first with a baseball bat. According to Alex, he responded by firing his pistol twice without taking aim. Witnesses to the shooting included the homeowner and the children. Although their testimonies were slightly inconsistent, the court ultimately ruled Charles's death an unintentional killing in self-defense. It's worth noting that Alex sustained only minor injuries. On the same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori hosted a party at their house, complete with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco in the exact spot where her husband had been shot, with visible bloodstains still present. Strangely, she made no arrangements for his funeral and didn't inform anyone about his death. It wasn't until a week later, when Charles's unclaimed body remained in the morgue, that his sons, mother, sister, and other relatives learned of his passing. Lori's life took a dramatic turn after her husband's death. She sold their home in Arizona and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, with her children. They settled in the same housing complex as her brother Alex Cox and his wife, Tammy. Lori enrolled her son in a special needs school, but her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, did not attend any school. As a result, many neighbors were unaware that Lori even had a second child, as Tylee was rarely seen outside. Around the same time, Lori made a disturbing comment about her daughter, referring to her as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, Lori, her children, and her brother Alex went on a trip to Yellowstone Park, where they met up with Chad. Several photos from the trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen again. 2 weeks later, on September 24, 2019, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the special needs school, claiming she would homeschool him. Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, died suddenly on October 19, less than a month after her husband's affair with Lori began. According to Chad, Tammy had been suffering from a cold and cough, and it was presumed that she died from respiratory failure in her sleep. There were no signs of violence on her body, and her death was ruled natural. However, Chad refused to allow an autopsy to determine the cause of death, a decision that raised no suspicions at the time. Following Tammy's passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they got married in a beachside ceremony. This news came as a shock to Chad's children, who were still grieving the loss of their mother and struggled to understand their father's actions. After returning to Arizona, they lived together and misled others by claiming that Lori's children were staying with relatives or that she didn't have any children at all. They also rented a storage unit and moved the children's belongings there, essentially erasing them from their home. On December 12, 2019, approximately 1 month later, Alex unexpectedly died at his home, appearing to have suffered a heart attack. At his family's request, no autopsy was performed, and his death was attributed to natural causes. As time went on, more and more people began inquiring about the whereabouts of Lori's children. She skillfully deceived her neighbors and acquaintances with lies, but it was more challenging to convince her relatives. Colby, Lori's eldest son, who had lost touch with his mother after moving away, made an effort to reconnect with his younger sister. However, Lori initially pretended to be her daughter, Tylee, when Colby contacted her. He soon became suspicious that something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles Vallo's relatives were concerned about the welfare of his grandchild, JJ, and repeatedly requested to visit or contact him. Lori consistently denied or made up excuses to prevent them from seeing the boy. The situation escalated when JJ's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police. Colby also approached the authorities to help locate his younger sister. When police officers visited Lori's home to speak with the children, she lied about their whereabouts, claiming they were visiting relatives. After this information proved false, the police gave Lori an ultimatum. She had a week to appear at the police station with the children. Instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii. On February 20, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search of Lori and Chad's home was conducted, but no signs of the missing children, Tylee and JJ, were found. Initially, Chad had defended Lori, claiming she didn't have any children, but now he was also under suspicion. It wasn't until June 9 that police discovered human remains buried in their backyard. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bodies were those of Ty and JJ. Further investigation led to the exhumation of the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to determine the true causes of their deaths. Toxicology reports revealed the presence of chemicals that could induce heart failure, suggesting that their deaths were not natural. Lori and Chad's trial began in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiracy, first-degree criminal acts, grand theft, deceit, and insurance fraud. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding Charles Vallo's death were reclassified from self-defense to premeditated murder. In court, witnesses testified that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and claimed she wanted to save their souls. There were allegations that the deaths of Tylee and JJ may have been ritualistic in nature. Notably, Tylee's body was partially burned, and Chad had previously sent Lori an email categorizing people, including Tylee, as having dark spirits. Lori and her husband, Chad, were both facing the possibility of capital punishment due to the severity of the charges against them. However, in May 2021, Lori's defense team successfully argued that she was incompetent to stand trial, bringing the proceedings to a halt. Meanwhile, all 5 of Chad's adult children maintained that their father was innocent and had been framed by Lori and her co-conspirator. After receiving treatment at a psychiatric facility, Lori was deemed fit to stand trial again in 2022. In March 2023, the judge ruled that capital punishment would not be an option for Lori, a decision that the prosecution is still trying to appeal. Lori was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in July 2023. Chad's trial is ongoing, and he still faces the possibility of capital punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ana Rosa Barrera. Ana Rosa Barrera, a 40-year-old woman. She lived in a commune in the Santa Maria department, near Córdoba City, in the province of Córdoba, Argentina. People close to her described Ana Rosa as a courageous and adventurous person who was not afraid to start over and move forward with determination. Reports indicate that Ana Rosa lived in a tent for 4 years, although the reasons for this are unclear. She worked at the Secretariat for Children, Adolescents, and Families in Córdoba, a job she truly enjoyed. Additionally, she and her partner, Marcelo Favio Ferretto, ran an upholstery workshop together. They met when Ana Rosa started working for Marcelo's business. By 2017, Ana Rosa and Marcelo had been in a 10-year relationship. They shared a common interest in Reiki, a practice that involves using the palms to promote physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Despite this common point, they still have problems in the relationship. Ana Rosa and Marcelo each have 4 children from previous relationships. As for Ana Rosa's family, her parents, brothers, and sisters reside in Córdoba. About Marcelo, he was a wallpaper maker with a workshop near their home. People close to they described Marcelo as a jealous and controlling person, which annoyed Ana Rosa. On Sunday, May 28, they visited relatives in Villa Lend, but the trip was marred by a heated argument sparked by Marcelo checking Ana Rosa's phone. The argument continued at their home, with neighbors hearing them shout and insult each other until the early hours of Monday morning. Later that day, Marcelo reported Ana Rosa missing to the police, although the exact timing of the report is disputed in media accounts. Most reports agree that Marcelo filed the report at the 18th police station on Tuesday, May 30th. According to Marcelo, claimed to have woken up at 6 a.m. on Monday to find Ana Rosa already gone, which he thought was unusual since she typically got up early to feed their dogs before leaving the house. He repeated this account to both the police and the media. Marcelo said he last saw Ana Rosa on Sunday night and then Monday night before going to bed. According to some sources, Marcelo realized something was wrong when Ana Rosa's colleagues called him, wondering about her absence. They knew she would never miss work without a good reason. Marcelo recounted the events leading up to her disappearance, saying that on Monday, he came across Ana Rosa's white Chevrolet while running an errand at the local pharmacy. Not long after, police discovered an abandoned car on Rainier Avenue outside a beauty salon in the Santa Isabel neighborhood. The location is about halfway between their home and Ana Rosa's workplace. Inside the car were her belongings and keys, but her cell phone was nowhere to be found. According to Marcelo, he tried to contact her, their friends, and their children also left messages, but no one received a response. The last message Ana Rosa sent via WhatsApp was at 10:40 p.m. Sunday, May 28. Ana Rosa's relatives all said that the circumstances surrounding Ana Rosa's disappearance are unclear. Marcelo has maintained regular contact with police since filing the report and has also attempted to locate Ana Rosa through social media and news outlets. In an interview with reporters, Marcelo shared Ana Rosa's plans on the day she went missing, which included an early morning swim at a gym and a scheduled appointment with a doctor. Marcelo emphasized that his primary concern is Ana Rosa's safe return home. Prosecutor Legendro Peralta Tanilo of Alta Gracia assumed control of the case, and the investigation commenced. Multiple theories were initially proposed, including the possibility of Ana Rosa being a victim of kidnapping, robbery, or revenge. The option of her leaving voluntarily was also considered. As part of the investigation, Marcelo testified for over 14 hours on Wednesday, May 31st. However, his statements became increasingly inconsistent, raising suspicions among investigators. Marcelo's claims raised suspicions among detectives due to inconsistencies and shifting demeanor. Initially, he was confident and gave frequent interviews, but later emphasized his innocence, providing unsolicited details and justifying himself by discussing his relationship with Ana Rosa. As time passed, Ana Rosa's loved ones became increasingly desperate due to the lack of progress in the search. Meanwhile, the investigative authorities persisted in their efforts to solve the case. The prosecutor leading the investigation was convinced that Marcelo was withholding information and urged the investigators to scrutinize him more thoroughly. On Friday, June 2nd, during another meeting with police officers, Marcelo's demeanor shifted. He became more composed. However, when detectives showed him data from cell phone towers that contradicted his alibi, Marcelo became dismayed and ultimately revealed the truth. He admitted to killing Ana Rosa, running her over, and then dismembering her body to get rid of the evidence. After confessing to the brutal crime, Marcelo revealed the location of the dismembered body of Ana Rosa. Following the Marcelo confession, the police, aided by a canine unit, found Ana Rosa's remains at approximately 2:30 p.m. in a hole dug by Marcelo on a dirt road in the countryside, near a factory. The location was familiar to Marcelo, as he frequently visited the area for work-related purposes. It became clear that Marcelo's previous statements were false, except for his mention of a quarrel that occurred early Monday morning. According to the reconstructed events, Marcelo and Ana Rosa had been arguing the entire weekend before she went missing. Marcelo's intense jealousy sparked the violence. In the heat of an argument, Marcelo used a sledgehammer to hit Ana Rosa multiple times until she died. He then tried to put her body in the car but failed. Instead, he used a knife to dismember her body. He placed Ana Rosa's remains in the car and began moving to her burial site. After pleading guilty, authorities conducted a search of the defendant and Ana Rosa's home on Friday, where they discovered various tools, including machetes and knives of various sizes. Marcelo was then arrested and facing charges of capital murder, a crime that could carry a sentence of life in prison. Prosecutor Peralta Atima explained that the defendant's statement, in which he took responsibility for the crime, was not considered a formal confession. Instead, the record shows that he admitted to the crime during an interview as a witness. A formal statement will be made in the coming days, once sufficient evidence is gathered to support the charges. This evidence will include the final autopsy report, forensic analysis of vehicles and items found during searches, and the results of luminal tests. Marcelo's lawyer, Jose Luis Saca, stated that the police statement had no legal weight and could not as evidence. Furthermore, the defense announced that the defendant would not testify. Over the weekend, investigations continued, and on June 5th, the preliminary autopsy report was released. The report concluded that Ana Rosa's cause of death was severe head trauma. On June 9th, it was discovered that luminol tests had been conducted at the home where Ana Rosa and Marcelo lived. The tests showed a large amount of blood had been cleaned up. The medical examiners also discovered new details during the autopsy, including knife cuts on the victim's extremities. A cut, 18 centimeters long and 7 centimeters deep, was found on the victim's neck, reaching the cervical region. Based on these findings, the prosecutor's office charged Marcelo with double aggravated murder. Almost 2 years after Ana Rosa's murder, Marcelo's trial began. The prosecution explained the seriousness of the charges to the jury. According to the autopsy results, Ana Rosa suffered a severe initial blow to the face, which left her unconscious, followed by multiple blows to the head that crushed her skull. At the first hearing, Marcelo decided to stay silent. The court then heard testimony from witnesses. Deborah Territorios, Ana Rosa's daughter, testified that after her mother met Marcelo, she became increasingly distant from her children and other family members. Deborah stated that she and her father moved to a different city, followed by her older siblings, which made it harder for them to communicate with their mother. However, when Deborah spent time alone with her mother, Ana Rosa was loving and caring. But whenever Marcelo was around, her mother would pull away. Deborah even had to leave her mother's house quickly on occasion because Marcelo was expected to arrive soon. Ana Rosa's cousin, Roberto Enrique Reina, also testified. He witnessed their argument on May 28, 2017, which started at his house. According to Roberto, the argument began when Marcelo saw a message on Ana Rosa's phone. The prosecutor's indictment highlights Marcelo's control over Ana Rosa, including a power imbalance in their relationship and objectifying her in front of others. Fernando, a co-worker and friend of the victim, Ana Rosa, explained that after she started dating Marcelo, she initially grew distant from everyone, but then she tried to reconnect. System. Fernando added that Marcelo seemed to imitate Ana Rosa's actions, even taking Reiki classes shortly after learning she was also taking. According to the indictment, Ana Rosa told a friend that after starting energy harmonization therapy, she felt better and was able to improve her relationships with family members. She also planned to visit her son in Bolivia. However, as Ana Rosa's life improved, Marcelo became increasingly aggressive. Fernando reported that Marcelo once lashed out when Ana Rosa said women with positive attitudes could achieve their goals, he calling women idiots who would end up dying in a ditch. On the second day of the hearing, Claudio Bustamante, the police officer who took Marcelo's statement, testified. He told the jury that Marcelo had spontaneously confessed during the interrogation without any pressure from him. According to Bustamante, Marcelo stated that Ana Rosa had told him on Monday that she was no longer satisfied with him and was cheating on him, which made Marcelo angry and prompted him to hit her, although he couldn't remember what he used to hit her. On April 11th, the 11th Criminal Court's jury delivered its verdict, finding Marcelo Favio fair guilty of the murder of Ana Rosa Barrera. The sentence was life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years, conditional on good behavior. Upon hearing the verdict, Ana Rosa's relatives burst into tears and shouted at Marcelo, labeling him as a murderer and wishing him to spend the rest of his life in prison. The prosecutor in charge of the case stated that the jury's decision aligned with the prosecution's request. The evidence showed that Marcelo Favio Fair had acted with full awareness and premeditation in planning Ana Rosa's murder. According to the prosecution, Marcelo's attempt to appear mentally unstable at the time of the crime was a tactic to evade the maximum sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dana Ireland. Dana Marie Ireland was born on December 12, 1968, in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to John Ireland and Mary Louise Crank. She was the youngest daughter, with an older sister, Sandra, who was 7 years her senior. In 1991, when Dana was 23, she visited her sister in Hawaii with her parents. On December 24th, Dana borrowed her sister's bike for a ride. However, she never returned. Her bike, shoe, and a clump of hair were later found on the side of the road, but Dana was nowhere to be seen. The condition of the bike suggested that Dana had been struck by a vehicle. The impact was severe, causing significant damage to the bike's wheels and steering wheel. Unfortunately, hopes that the driver who hit Dana had taken her to the hospital were short-lived. Tragically, Dana was found 5 miles from where her bike was discovered. She had suffered severe injuries to her body and head, and her lower body was exposed. The evidence suggested that Dana had not only been hit by a car but had also been taken advantage of while she was vulnerable. Nurse Jerry Gallagher is haunted by a traumatic event that occurred on Christmas Eve 1991. A friend, Brian, arrived at her home on Satellite Road in a rural area 25 miles southeast of Hilo. He had found she, Dana Ireland, severely injured and in need of medical attention. Gallagher, who was licensed to provide care, accompanied Brian to the scene, just a mile from her house. Upon arrival, she found Dana lying on the ground, naked from the waist down, with severe bruises on the inner sides of her legs. Gallagher attempted to administer first aid using a kit, but Dana's most critical injury was a severe head wound on the back of her skull. When Gallagher inquired about her identity, Dana's response was incoherent, seeming to utter the words, "Is land." Gallagher then asked who was responsible for her condition, but Dana's answers remained unclear. Dana did, however, repeatedly request Gallagher to return her keys so she could drive home. Gallagher made an effort to keep her awake while awaiting further assistance. Due to the area's lack of phone services, significant delays occurred before an ambulance finally arrived more than 2 hours after the initial call for help. Moreover, further complications arose when the emergency services dispatcher mistakenly relayed the wrong location for the incident. These factors collectively resulted in an additional 34-minute delay for Dana to receive the medical attention she required. Gallagher had considered driving Dana to the hospital himself, but she was worried that moving her could cause further injury. She has since struggled with the decision and the fact that it took so long for help to arrive. An ambulance finally brought Dana to Hilo Hospital at 7:56 p.m. Unbeknownst to her parents, John and Mary Louise, who were searching for her, Dana was the injured woman being treated at the hospital. They had found her damaged bicycle by the side of the road and were trying to locate her. At the time, Mary thought someone had hit Dana and taken her to the hospital. John stayed near the bike while Mary and their eldest daughter Sandra went to the hospital to look for Dana. When the ambulance arrived with Dana, Mary and Sandra were already there. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save Dana. She was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. due to severe injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident, including blood loss and trauma to her head, pelvis, and abdomen. Dana's family was shocked by her death, which permanently altered their lives. As time passed, they would face another challenge, a long and arduous search for suspects and subsequent trials. The police investigation was described by local newspapers as intense. They discovered a T-shirt at the crime scene that belonged to the perpetrator. They also seized a sheet from the hospital with semen stains on it, which was crucial evidence since Dana had semen on her body when she was admitted. Furthermore, a bite mark on Dana's body matched the teeth print of her attacker. The authorities obtained a DNA sample from the perpetrator, but this was of limited use in 1991. The tire tracks from the bike and the secluded area where it was found provided few leads. Despite interviewing residents, the investigators could not find any witnesses who saw the car that hit Dana's bike, likely due to the remote location and poor road conditions, which deterred cars from traveling there frequently. The investigation into the Dana Ireland case had reached a dead end due to a lack of witnesses and evidence. However, a breakthrough occurred when John Gonsalves contacted the Hawaii County Police in May 1994. Gonsalves was involved in a high-profile case involving illegal substances, but he received a suspended sentence due to his cooperation with the police. Gonsalves revealed that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had important information about the Dana Ireland case. Frank Pauline stated that brothers Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer were involved in the attack on Dana Ireland. The Schweitzer family lived next door to the Frank Pauline family, and their families did not get along. According to Frank Pauline, he was present when the Schweitzers attacked Dana Ireland. They allegedly ran her over, put her in the trunk, and took her to another location. Based on Frank Pauline's statements, the police made Albert Schweitzer, Sean Schweitzer, and Frank Pauline the main suspects in the case. Frank Pauline Jr. was born on April 27, 1973, in Fremont, California, to Frank Sr. and Patricia Pauline. He grew up in Puna, Hawaii, where he became a father of 3 sons by the age of 20. However, Frank had a history of run-ins with the law, starting at the age of 9. By February 8, 1983, Frank Pauline had been caught in a burglary. As he got older, the severity of his crimes increased. In February 1994, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for harassment and robbery. Despite this, Pauline continued to commit crimes, earning him the nickname "Walking Crime Wave" from prosecutors. After being sentenced, Pauline was taken into custody to start his prison term. However, he managed to escape and was classified as a fugitive. He was eventually recaptured in Honolulu a few days later. 3 months after Pauline received a 10-year sentence, his brother John Gonsalves contacted the authorities and provided information about the Dana Ireland case. Pauline and Gonsalves decided to cooperate with the investigation, which could potentially reduce Pauline's sentence. John Gonsalves was initially a questionable source of information, but after speaking with investigators, the case against him for illegal substances was closed, and he received a suspended sentence. Pauline claimed to have information about the Dana Ireland case and was interrogated by investigators from the Big Island. The 90-minute interrogation took place in Honolulu, where Pauline was in custody. During the interrogation, Pauline provided details about the attack on Dana Ireland and reconstructed the crime scene on the Big Island, showing detectives the locations he mentioned earlier. Pauline told detectives that on December 24, 1991, brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzer picked him up at his home in a purple Volkswagen Beetle. Albert Ian was driving. Before they saw a woman on the side of the road, they stopped to take illegal substances. As they approached an intersection near Kapaho, they saw she standing on the side of the road. Pauline recalled Albert Ian pointing her out, saying, "Look at that girl," but they initially continued driving. Albert Ian then suggested turning the car around so he could talk to she. As they drove back, traveling at 40 to 45 miles per hour, Albert Ian failed to stop in time and accidentally hit she, later identified as Dana Ireland. After hitting Dana, the trio got out of the car, loaded her into the trunk, and continued driving. A short distance later, they stopped and removed Dana from the car. Despite being injured, she was still alive. Pauline claimed he did not assault Dana, unlike the Schweitzer brothers. However, he said something that had severe consequences. According to Pauline, Albert Ian insisted that he find a tire iron and hit Dana on the head to end her suffering. Pauline's initial statement to the police was written down and he signed it, confirming that he testified voluntarily, without coercion, threats, or influence from substances. He was later moved to the Maui Community Correctional Center for protection due to threats from fellow inmates. However, 2 years later, Pauline retracted his statement, claiming he fabricated his story at his stepbrother's request to avoid jail. He admitted he was not present during the attack but had information about those responsible. Pauline explained that he lied about being there to make his information credible and to avoid being accused of perjury, but perjury was not one of the charges he faced. On July 30, 1997, Frank Pauline was charged with the murder of Dana Ireland after signing a confession claiming he had struck her with a tire iron. However, the confession raised suspicions, as when investigators took him to the Big Island, he was unable to identify the exact location of the crime or where Dana's body was found. This led investigators to question the truthfulness of Pauline's confession. Pauline eventually retracted his confession, fearing that if he continued to lie, he could be charged with perjury. His retraction was motivated in part by his realization that his half-brother, Albert Gonsalves, was innocent and being wrongly accused. In the end, Gonsalves was able to avoid major charges related to a separate crime, and in exchange, he agreed to testify against Pauline at his trial. At the time of the arrest, DNA testing technology was not as advanced as it is today. Despite this, the authorities collected DNA samples from Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. They also analyzed biological fluids from the gurney sheet used to transport Dana Ireland to the hospital and swabs from her body. However, the results were unexpected. The DNA of Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers did not match the DNA of the perpetrator. Although the charges against the 3 men were dropped, the investigation continued. The prosecution suggested that someone else must have been involved, as other evidence also failed to implicate Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. For example, the teeth of the Schweitzer brothers and Pauline did not match the bite mark found on the victim's chest. Furthermore, no traces of Dana Ireland's blood or hair were found in Albert Ian Schweitzer's Volkswagen, which he had acquired only a month after her death. External pressures, including those from the Dana Ireland family, the public, and the press, may have influenced the course of events in the investigation into Dana Ireland's death. Albert Ian Schweitzer was 20 years old at the time of Dana Ireland's murder and had only traffic-related infractions on his record. Sean Schweitzer, who was 16 when Dana Ireland died, received charges in connection with her death at the age of 23. Around that time, Sean also faced unrelated charges of fourth-degree assault for inappropriately touching a 15-year-old girl when he was 16. He received a sentence of 180 days in prison and 1 year of probation. Despite their records showing a pattern of questionable behavior, DNA testing cleared all 3 suspects involved in the Dana Ireland case of her murder. However, this finding was likely undermined by the unrelated convictions that surfaced in their pasts. 5 days after Frank Pauline's initial statement to the police, investigators searched the Schweitzer family home and seized Albert Ian's 1957 Volkswagen Beetle as evidence. Both Sean and Albert Ian claimed they were not with Frank Pauline on the night of the crime, although they admitted to knowing him. Sean stated that he was at home on Christmas Eve, while Albert Ian said he was either at home or at his uncle's house. Albert Ian also explained how he acquired his car, initially denying that he had done any bodywork on it. He revealed that the car was originally purple, but he repainted it yellow because it wasn't his preferred color. The Schweitzer brothers' lawyers believed that Frank Pauline had falsely accused them due to a long-standing feud between their families. Nevertheless, the prosecution continued to pursue the case. On May 5, 1999, just days before the statute of limitations expired for some of the crimes committed against Dana Ireland, the police received a statement from Michael Ortiz, a cellmate of the Schweitzers and an associate of Gonzalez. This new information was seen as a potential breakthrough in the case. During questioning by authorities, Michael Ortiz claimed that Albert Ian Schweitzer had confessed to his involvement in the crime. Based on this testimony, Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers were recharged in connection with Dana Ireland's death just 2 weeks later. This development raised suspicions and distrust among the public, as the information had come from a questionable source and had been revealed just days before the statute of limitations was set to expire. Frank Pauline was the first to face trial. The proceedings were highly emotional. Pauline professed his innocence, stating that he had lied when he initially confessed to being involved in Dana's murder. When taking the stand, Mary Ireland recounted receiving the devastating news about her daughter. She described the distressing scene: a bicycle on the road, a shoe, and a lock of hair. However, the witnesses who linked Pauline to the crime had checkered pasts and stood to gain from implicating him. Among those who benefited from Pauline being found guilty was his half-brother, Gonzalez, who became a witness for the prosecution. Witness William Chum, who also testified against Pauline, said Pauline confessed his involvement in this crime. However, when asked if he saw Pauline in the courtroom, he pointed to another person, although Frank Pauline was there. The jury also saw Dana Ireland's bike, shorts, top, underwear, and a Jimmy's t-shirt recovered from the scene. Not one of those items had DNA from Pauline or the Schweitzers. To get around the lack of scientific evidence, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida insisted that the Jimmy's t-shirt covered in Dana Ireland's blood belonged to Pauline. "We're not afraid of that evidence. We embrace it," Ashida said. Then, that same DNA technology works both ways for the defense and the prosecution. Pauline's lawyer protested, saying the t-shirt wasn't even Frank's size. Nevertheless, the jury found that the evidence and assumptions presented at the trial were enough to convict Pauline. Pauline's guilty verdict and 180-year sentence were handed down despite forensic evidence proving his confession was false. The next trial was that of Albert Ian Schweitzer, who knew about Pauline's sentence and was surprised when prosecutors offered him a plea deal, given the lack of physical evidence. Albert Ian Schweitzer rejected the offer, maintaining his innocence. The prosecutor claimed Schweitzer's Volkswagen Beetle was involved in the crime, but several facts contradicted this assertion. Witnesses in the area where Dana was found reported seeing a pickup truck, not the Beetle, and forensic analysis of Schweitzer's car turned up no evidence linking it to the crime. Furthermore, Schweitzer only became the official owner of the Volkswagen in January 1992. Albert Ian Schweitzer was sentenced to 130 years in prison based on the testimony of Michael Ortiz, who claimed Albert Ian had confessed to the crime, and evidence of scratches on Albert Ian's car bumper. After seeing his brother convicted, Sean Schweitzer initially wanted to prove his innocence but eventually decided to take a plea deal due to concerns about the justice system failing him again. As part of his agreement with the prosecutor's office, Sean Schweitzer was required to testify against his brother and Frank Pauline, who were accused of playing a role in Dana Ireland's death. He was also required to take a polygraph test to prove his honesty. The polygraph test was administered on March 24, 2000, by an examiner from the State Attorney General's office. However, the test results showed that Sean was not truthful about his involvement in the crime. Despite this, he was still allowed to plead guilty to the lesser charges of kidnapping and involuntary deprivation of life. There was a discrepancy in the court records regarding the polygraph test results. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida initially stated that Sean had failed the test, but later claimed that he had passed it. Sean was ultimately sentenced to 5 years probation, with credit for 18 months served. In an interview after his release, Sean stated that the decision to accept the plea deal was made by his family, who were concerned about the potential impact on his parents if both brothers were imprisoned. His brother, Albert Ian, who was later sentenced to 130 years in prison, recalled advising Sean to accept the deal to avoid serving life in prison, as imprisonment of both brothers might have been too stressful for their parents. Years later, Sean still feels remorseful for testifying against his brother and making a deal with the prosecutor. He and his family have struggled to move on from the case, and Sean has had a hard time finding a job due to the community's knowledge of the case. Community members made remarks about the case for years, causing Sean to experience disappointment and frustration. After being wrongfully convicted, Albert Ian Schweitzer and his family refused to give up the fight. In 2005, Albert Ian applied to the Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to re-examining convictions using new evidence and investigative techniques. The case eventually gained momentum in 2010 when students from the University of Hawaii, lawyers, and professors started re-investigating the old files from the Dana Ireland case. Local prosecutors authorized the investigation, which has spanned several years. Throughout this process, efforts continued to deliver the desired outcome, justice for Albert Ian. The goal was to rectify a miscarriage of justice and bring about restitution. The investigation's findings and the subsequent actions taken will bring truth and closure to the matter. Ultimately, the hope is that justice will prevail and the issue will be laid to rest. Years passed and Mary Louise Ireland, Dana's mother, eventually passed away on her 92nd birthday in 2016. Meanwhile, Linda battled breast cancer, which made it difficult for her to visit her son, Albert Ian. When Linda finally had the chance to see Albert Ian for the very last time, she was heartbroken. During this emotionally charged visit, Albert Ian expressed a final wish to his mother. He didn't want her to leave him, and the thought of saying goodbye was unbearable. He had always found it hard to see the people he loved leave, especially after losing his grandmother. Albert Ian confided in his mother that it was his greatest fear, losing those closest to him, and that he never wanted to have to say goodbye to her again. A DNA expert, Nancy Dinh, testified at the trial after retesting evidence using advanced methods that were not available during the original trials. She explained that technology has improved significantly since 2000, allowing for the detection of details that were previously invisible. Contrary to the 2000 authorities' claim that Frank Pauline's and the Schweitzer brothers' DNA was not on the T-shirt due to excessive amounts of Dana Ireland's blood, scientists from the Innocence Project used modern technology to distinguish between Dana's DNA and other DNA on the T-shirt. They also found seminal fluid and sweat from the armpit on the T-shirt. Nancy Dinh confirmed that the DNA found on the T-shirt and Dana's body belonged to the same person. However, she stated that this person was neither Frank Pauline nor one of the Schweitzer brothers. Following Nancy Dinh's testimony, a tire tread expert remotely testified, stating that the tire tracks found at both crime scenes could not have been made by the Schweitzer brothers' Volkswagen. In his opinion, the tracks were likely left by a larger vehicle, such as a truck, SUV, or van. The final witness to testify was dentist Adam Freeman. Dana Ireland had what appeared to be a human bite mark on her left breast, according to the prosecutor's initial assessment. However, forensic expert Freeman disputed this claim, stating it was not a bite mark. This case highlights the flaws in forensic science, particularly in the analysis of bite marks, Freeman testified. After the witnesses finished testifying, District Court Judge Peter Kubota delivered his verdict. He stated that the new DNA evidence, along with the tire tread evidence, the disputed bite mark evidence, and Sean Schweitzer's recantation, collectively proved that a jury in a new trial would likely find Albert Ian Schweitzer not guilty. Therefore, Kubota declared the conviction vacated and ordered Mr. Albert Ian Schweitzer's immediate release from custody. With these words, spoken 23 years after Albert Ian Schweitzer's guilty verdict and 25 years after his arrest, Albert Ian was suddenly exonerated and freed. Judge Kubota then addressed Albert Ian Schweitzer with heartfelt words. With 1/3 of his life still ahead of him, the judge offered a choice: to live in anger and resentment towards the process and the people who had wronged him, or to find a new sense of freedom. Kubota suggested that Albert Ian make the most of this opportunity, surrounded by his family, who had come to support him. Freed from his handcuffs, Albert Ian hugged his lawyers and then his family members, including some he had not seen in decades. His mother was overcome with emotion in his arms. Albert Ian's young son, who had grown up without his father, was also in the courtroom and shared a hug with him. His younger brother, Sean, was there too, with a warm smile and open arms. As a result of Albert Ian's acquittal, his brother Sean's lawyer is now seeking to have his own criminal record cleared. The story serves as a reminder of the tragic fate of Frank Pauline, who died in prison in New Mexico in 2015. Pauline was attacked by a fellow inmate, Daniel Hood, who was serving time for taking 2 lives. On April 27, 2015, Hood attacked Pauline in the recreation yard at the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility, striking him 3 times on the back of the head with a rock. The motive behind the attack was Hood's belief that Pauline was a snitch. Despite efforts by the medical staff, Pauline could not be saved. In response, his family's lawyer plans to file a petition for his posthumous rehabilitation. Albert Ian Schweitzer finds the transition from prison life to freedom extremely difficult. He shares that adjusting to life outside of prison has been more challenging than he anticipated. Most days are a struggle with anxiety. While Albert Ian may be eligible for compensation for wrongful imprisonment, which could award him $50,000 for each year spent in prison, the process is not straightforward. His lawyers are working diligently to ensure he receives the compensation he is owed. The Dana Ireland case remains unsolved 3 decades later, but investigators are hopeful that advances in DNA testing and genealogy will help them identify the person responsible for destroying the Dana family's life.